550 years ago, Europeans, using new types of sailing ships, were just beginning to explore the world. Way back then, European people didn't know the continents of North and South America even existed. And likewise, the people of North and South America knew nothing of the world's other continents. The reason for this was quite simple. Up until that time, they had been afraid to cross the mighty oceans that cover most of our planet. But in 1492, things really began to change when this man, named Christopher Columbus, sailed across the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Columbus was born in the famous Italian port city of Genoa in the year 1451, and as a young man, he worked on ships that sailed all around the Mediterranean Sea. When Columbus was young, the small European country of Portugal, whose southern coastline is seen here, had the world's best explorers. They were the best because they had the world's finest ships and navigational instruments. And for many years before Columbus was even born, they had been sending ships down the coast of Africa, trying to find a sea route to India. Columbus's experiences along the rocky coast of Portugal taught him a lot about the ways of the sea. As a matter of fact, the first time he ever came to Portugal was when he washed up on the beach not far from the fort seen here. After that, Columbus decided to stay in Portugal, and it wasn't long before he got a job on a Portuguese ship that took him far to the north, to Ireland and to Iceland. When he got back to Portugal, Columbus got a job working for his brother, who owned a shop that sold maps, charts, and instruments used by seamen in navigation. Back then, the best map of the world hadn't changed much for over 1,000 years, and the only continents shown on it were Europe and parts of Africa and Asia. And yet it's thanks to this ancient and very inaccurate map that Columbus came to believe that the eastern shore of Asia lay only about 3,000 miles, or 5,600 kilometers, across the Atlantic Ocean to the west of Portugal. The idea of sailing west from Europe to Asia had never been tried before, so people had no idea what, if anything, lay on the other side of the ocean. Even so, there were plenty of European traders who wanted to sail to Eastern Asia and the nearby islands known as the Indies, because that was where they could get valuable spices, silks, jewels, and porcelain pottery that people in Europe would pay a lot of money for. As Columbus got older, he became a ship's captain, and after sailing south far down the coast of Africa, his desire to cross the Atlantic grew and grew. After a few more years at sea, Columbus was ready to take his amazing plan to the King of Portugal and ask him for the ships and sailors he needed to try to reach Asia. But after hearing Columbus's plan, the king refused to help him. So Columbus headed off to the nearby country of Spain to try his luck there. He told King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella his plan, and they liked it, but they didn't help him until the year 1492, when Spain finally defeated the nearby kingdom of Granada, with whom they had been fighting for many years. But then they gave Columbus everything he had asked for: 3 ships and a crew of men, a part of any trade he developed, the right to govern any new lands he discovered, and the highest rank in the Spanish Navy. And only a few months later, his sailors began to get the ships ready for a long ocean voyage. Then, on August 3rd, 1492, from the harbor seen here, his 3 ships, the Niña, Pinta, and Santa Maria, left Spain on what would become the most famous voyage in history. And soon they headed west into the Atlantic Ocean, where no one had ever gone before. As they slowly sailed on, the weather stayed good and the ocean stayed calm. But after 3 weeks at sea, they still hadn't seen any land, and the sailors started to think Columbus was wrong about how far it was to Asia. Some of them worried about sea monsters, or that the world might be flat and they would sail off its edge. So that after over a month had gone by, Columbus decided he would only keep going 3 more days, and if no land was found by then, he would turn around and go back to Spain. But 2 days later, a sailor spotted an island. As the ships got closer to shore, everyone could see that it was very beautiful. Soon they landed, and Columbus claimed the island for Spain, and to thank God for bringing him safely across the ocean, he named it San Salvador, or Holy Savior Island. Finding this island made Columbus very happy, because he thought he must be in the Indies, not far from Asia. And that was why he started calling the native people Indians. But little did he know that his long voyage from Spain had only gotten him as far as the Bahama Islands, close to Florida in today's United States, but still a long way from Asia. Columbus soon left San Salvador to search for the mainland of Asia, and in a short time he came to a huge island that today is called Cuba. Cuba is so big Columbus didn't even know it was an island. He thought it could be Asia, so he sent men inland to find Beijing, the capital of the Asian country of China. But instead of finding Beijing, all they found were native villages and jungles. Columbus kept exploring, but on Christmas Day his ship, the Santa Maria, got wrecked on some rock off the coast of another island they had named Hispaniola, or the Spanish island. They were able to save a lot of things from the ship, so Columbus decided to build a fort there and to search for gold in the nearby rivers. And when he actually found gold, Columbus decided he should leave 40 men behind and go back to Spain to show the king and queen the gold and some of the other things he had discovered. And after seeing what Columbus had brought them, the rulers realized Spain could make a lot of money in the Indies. That was why they decided to give him 17 ships and about 1,500 men to set up a Spanish colony on Hispaniola. But when Columbus got back there, he found that all the men he had left behind were dead. The native people had killed them because the Spaniards had been so cruel to them. But Columbus didn't want to give up, so he had his men build the new Spanish colony in a different place. And the missionaries who came with the colonists to work teaching the native people Christianity. Then Columbus sailed off to search for Asia again. But even after making 2 more trips back and forth across the Atlantic Ocean, he still couldn't find it. And by this time, it almost didn't matter, because a Portuguese explorer named Vasco da Gama had already reached the eastern parts of Asia by sailing around Africa. And so Portugal beat Spain to Asia and captured the rich trade in spices, silks, and jewels. Right around the same time, another explorer named Amerigo Vespucci crossed the Atlantic Ocean, and he realized that the land he was seeing was not part of Asia at all, but belonged to an undiscovered continent he called the New World. Later on, other explorers discovered that there were actually 2 continents in the New World, and a map maker named them North America and South America in honor of Amerigo Vespucci. Even though Christopher Columbus died without realizing he had found a new world, he is still one of the most important people in history, because Columbus was the first person to sail across the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and to discover good sea routes between Europe and the Americas, and because he was also the first person to found European colonies in the New World. The changes begun by Columbus were mostly good for the huge numbers of Europeans who settled in the Americas and got rich on gold and farmland. But they were mostly bad for the Native Americans who lost both their land and their lives to their new European rulers. The changes were also bad for the millions of Africans that were brought to the New World to be slaves. And it is amazing to think that all of these things began because of the explorations of just one man named Christopher Columbus. True or false? When Columbus was a young man, European people had never heard of North and South America. True or false? Columbus sailed back and forth across the Atlantic Ocean more than once. True or false? The King of Portugal paid for the ships Columbus used to cross the Atlantic Ocean. True or false? After crossing the Atlantic Ocean in 1492, Columbus thought he was near the mainland of Asia. True or false? North and South America were named in honor of Christopher Columbus.